My fiancé secretly tracked down my abusive parents who abandoned me in foster care and invited them to our wedding as a surprise because she thought she knew what was best for me despite me clearly explaining why I cut them off years ago. When I discovered her betrayal and called off the wedding, she screamed that my parents were right to abandon me and that I'm unlovable, but I'd rather be alone than marry someone who disrespects my trauma like this. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am, 28 years old and trying to make sense of what just happened to my life. 3 days ago, I was supposed to marry the woman I thought was my soulmate. Instead, I'm sitting in my empty apartment, processing one of the biggest betrayals I've ever experienced. My fiancée Jessica and I have been together for 5 years. We met at a coffee shop where she was studying for her nursing boards and I was working on architectural blueprints for a project. She spilled her latte on my drawings, and instead of being angry, I found her flustered apologies adorable. We talked for hours that day, and I genuinely believed I'd found my person. Jessica comes from what most people would call a perfect family. Her parents have been married for 30 years, she has 2 siblings who all get along beautifully, and their family gatherings look like something out of a holiday movie. Her childhood was filled with family vacations, birthday parties, and the kind of unconditional love and support that I could only dream about. My background couldn't be more different. My parents, Robert and Linda, were both severe alcoholics who had no business raising a child. My earliest memories are of empty liquor bottles scattered around our trailer, screaming matches that lasted until dawn, and being left alone for days while they went on drinking binges. When I was 6 years old, my mother drove drunk with me in the car and crashed into a telephone pole. That was the incident that finally brought Child Protective Services into our lives. I was removed from their custody and placed into foster care, where I would spend the next 7 years of my life. Foster care wasn't the salvation people sometimes imagine it to be. I was moved between 12 different homes during those 7 years. Some families were kind but overwhelmed, others saw foster children as easy sources of extra income. In 3 different homes, I was physically abused by older foster siblings who took their own trauma out on me. One foster father would lock me in a basement storage room as punishment for minor infractions like forgetting to make my bed. The worst part wasn't even the abuse, it was the constant instability. Just when I would start to feel safe somewhere, I'd be moved again. I learned not to unpack my belongings completely because I never knew when I'd be stuffed back into garbage bags and shipped off to the next placement. When I was 13, something unexpected happened. Robert and Linda had completed a court-mandated addiction treatment program and petitioned to regain custody. They claimed they had gotten sober, found stable housing, and were ready to be parents. The court system, overwhelmed and understaffed, decided to give them another chance. I remember the social worker asking me if I wanted to go back to live with my birth parents. I was 13 years old, desperate for stability and family, so I said yes. I thought maybe they had really changed. Maybe they had spent those 7 years missing me and working to become better people. I was wrong. Within 6 months of returning to their custody, both Robert and Linda were drinking again. But this time, their abuse wasn't just neglect, it was intentional and cruel. Robert would beat me with his belt for any perceived disrespect, which could be anything from making too much noise while he was watching TV to asking for help with homework. Linda would scream at me that I was ungrateful and that they should have never fought to get me back. The psychological abuse was worse than the physical violence. They would tell me that I was damaged goods because of my time in foster care, that no one would ever really love me, and that I should be grateful they were willing to keep me around. They blamed me for their drinking, saying the stress of raising a problem child drove them to alcohol. I survived by focusing on school and planning my escape. I knew that education was my only way out, so I studied obsessively and worked part-time jobs to save money. I never brought friends home because I was ashamed of my living situation and afraid of what my parents might do or say. The day I turned 18, I packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags and left for college on a full academic scholarship. I had been accepted to a university 3 states away, and I never looked back. I changed my phone number, didn't give them my college address, and cut off all contact. For the first time in my life, I felt free. College was challenging, but I thrived in the structured environment. I worked multiple jobs to pay for expenses my scholarship didn't cover, but I didn't mind. Every dollar I earned was proof that I could survive and succeed without them. I didn't date much in college because I was too focused on my studies and work, and honestly, I didn't trust myself to recognize healthy relationships. I went to therapy through the University Counseling Center, which helped me understand that my parents' treatment wasn't my fault and that I deserved better. After graduation, I moved to a different city and started my career as an architect. I was finally building the life I had always dreamed of, stable, independent, and free from the chaos and abuse of my childhood. That's when I met Jessica. From the beginning, Jessica was fascinated by my family history. She would ask endless questions about my parents and my childhood, and I was honest with her about everything, the alcoholism, the abuse, the foster care, all of it. I thought her interest came from a place of love and wanting to understand me better. But as our relationship progressed, Jessica became obsessed with the idea that I needed to reconcile with Robert and Linda. She would bring it up constantly, suggesting that maybe they had changed, that people deserve second chances, that family is everything. No matter how many times I explained why contact with them wasn't safe or healthy for me, she would argue that I was being too harsh. Everyone makes mistakes, she would say. They're getting older now. What if they die and you never got the chance to forgive them? What if they've actually changed and you're missing out on having a relationship with them? When we have kids, don't you want them to know their grandparents? I would patiently explain, over and over, why reconciliation wasn't possible. I told her about the years of therapy I had needed to recover from their abuse. I explained that some damage can't be undone and that protecting my mental health meant maintaining distance from toxic people, even if they were biologically related to me. Jessica would seem to understand in the moment, but then she'd bring it up again a few weeks later. It became a recurring argument in our relationship, but I loved her enough to keep explaining my position and hoping she would eventually respect it. 6 months ago, Jessica proposed to me. Despite our ongoing disagreement about my parents, I said yes because I believed we could work through anything together. We started planning our wedding for December, and I was genuinely excited about starting this new chapter of our lives. 3 weeks before our wedding date, I came home early from work with a surprise. Jessica had been working extra shifts at the hospital, and I wanted to cook her favorite dinner and give her a chance to relax. I had picked up flowers and wine and was planning a romantic evening. As I walked through the front door, I heard Jessica on the phone in our bedroom. The house is small, and she was speaking loudly enough that I could hear every word. I know he's going to be upset at first, she was saying to whoever was on the other end. But once he sees them at the wedding and realizes they've changed, he'll understand that I did the right thing. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen in our living room, holding the flowers and wine, as Jessica continued her conversation. I found them through a private investigator last month. They were so excited when I told them about the wedding and invited them. His father cried when he heard that his son was getting married. I felt like I was going to throw up. Jessica had gone behind my back and contacted the people who had traumatized me for years. She had invited them to our wedding without my knowledge or consent. I know Michael said he didn't want them there, but he's just being stubborn, Jessica continued. He's afraid to forgive them because he's been hurt before. But I'm going to help him heal from his past. That's what wives do for their husbands. I quietly set down the flowers and wine and crept closer to the bedroom door.
Hey guys, just in case TikTok gets banned in the US next month, make sure you're following the YouTube channel link in bio.
They're going to sit in the front row on his side, Jessica was saying. I want him to see them as soon as he walks down the aisle. I think the shock of seeing them there will break down his walls, and he'll realize how much he's missed them. The person on the other end must have expressed some concern because Jessica's voice became defensive. I know it's a risk, but Michael is being unreasonable about this. He needs to grow up and stop holding grudges. His parents made mistakes when they were younger, but they're different people now. They deserve a chance to be part of his wedding day. I had heard enough. I quietly left the house and drove to my best friend Tony's apartment, where I sat in his living room and told him everything I had just overheard. Dude, that's completely fucked up, Tony said, shaking his head. She can't just ambush you with your abusive parents at your own wedding. That's not love, that's manipulation. Tony had been my roommate in college and knew my full history with Robert and Linda. He had seen me work 3 years of therapy to heal from my childhood trauma, and he understood why I'd made the difficult decision to cut them off. What are you going to do? He asked. I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to confront Jessica immediately and demand that she uninvite them. But another part of me was so hurt by her betrayal that I couldn't imagine how we could move forward from this. When I finally went home that night, Jessica acted like nothing had happened. She was excited about our upcoming wedding, chattering about last-minute details and how perfect everything was going to be. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what I had overheard because I was still processing the magnitude of her deception. Update 1. For 3 days, I carried the knowledge of Jessica's betrayal while she continued to act normal. I barely slept, barely ate, and could hardly focus at work. I kept replaying her phone conversation in my mind, trying to understand how the woman I loved could violate my boundaries so completely. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat Jessica down and told her directly that I knew what she had done. I heard your phone conversation 3 days ago, I said. I know you contacted my parents and invited them to our wedding. Jessica's face went through several emotions, surprise, guilt, and then defiance. Michael, I can explain, she started. I know you're going to be upset, but I really think this is what's best for you. What's best for me? I repeated, incredulous. Jessica, these people abused me for years. They told me I was worthless and unlovable. They beat me and neglected me and caused me trauma that I'm still working through in therapy. How could inviting them to our wedding possibly be what's best for me? Jessica took my hands and looked into my eyes with what she clearly thought was compassion. Baby, I met with them last month, she said. I drove to their town and had coffee with them. They're completely different people now. They've been sober for 3 years, and they're living in a nice little house with a garden. Your father has a steady job at a hardware store, and your mother volunteers at a local animal shelter. I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. You drove to meet them? Jessica, you went behind my back and met with my abusers without telling me? I wanted to see for myself what they were like now, she said. And Michael, they're not the same people who hurt you when you were a child. They've grown and changed. They told me how much they regret the way they treated you and how much they want to make amends. Of course they told you that, I said. They're master manipulators. Did you think they were going to admit to being abusive parents to my fiancé? Jessica shook her head. You're not being fair to them or to yourself. They've been sober for years. They've done the work to change. And they love you, Michael. They want to be part of your life again. I stood up and started pacing our living room. Jessica, even if they have changed, which I seriously doubt, that doesn't mean I owe them a relationship. They lost the right to be part of my life when they chose alcohol over their child's safety and well-being. But they're your parents, Jessica insisted. Family is everything. And when we have children, don't you want them to have grandparents? I want our children to be safe, I said. I want them to be around people who love and protect them unconditionally. Based on my experience, Robert and Linda are not those people. Jessica's expression hardened. You're being selfish and stubborn. You're so focused on things that happened years ago that you can't see the possibility of healing and forgiveness. This isn't about forgiveness, Jessica. This is about boundaries and self-protection. And it's about the fact that you went behind my back and made a decision that directly affects my mental health and safety without consulting me. I'm going to be your wife, Jessica said. Sometimes wives have to make difficult decisions for the good of their families. I knew you would say no if I asked, so I took the initiative to do what needed to be done. I stared at her in disbelief. You took the initiative to invite my abusers to our wedding because you knew I would say no? Do you hear yourself right now? They're coming whether you like it or not, Jessica said firmly. The wedding is in 5 days. The invitations have been sent, they've bought plane tickets, and they're excited to see you get married. You can choose to be angry about it, or you can choose to embrace this opportunity to heal. Update 2. That night, I called in sick to work and spent the entire day walking around the city, trying to process what Jessica had told me. She had not only betrayed my trust but was now demanding that I accept her betrayal as some kind of gift. I thought about all the therapy sessions I had attended to work through my childhood trauma. I thought about the panic attacks I used to have when I would unexpectedly see men who looked like Robert or hear women with voices similar to Linda's. I thought about the years it had taken me to learn that I deserved to be treated with kindness and respect. And then I thought about Jessica's complete dismissal of all of that work when she decided she knew better than me about my own life and healing process. When I came home that evening, Jessica was in the kitchen making dinner like it was a normal Tuesday night. How was your day? She asked cheerfully. Jessica, I need you to uninvite my parents from our wedding, I said. She turned around from the stove and sighed. Michael, we've been through this. They're coming, and that's final. You'll thank me later. If you don't uninvite them, I'm calling off the wedding. Jessica laughed. You're being dramatic. You're not going to call off our wedding 5 days beforehand over something like this. Try me. The smile faded from Jessica's face. Michael, you're overreacting. This is supposed to be the happiest week of our lives. Don't ruin it over some childhood grudge. Childhood grudge? I repeated. Jessica, these people beat me. They told me I was worthless. They chose alcohol over my safety and well-being for my entire childhood. This isn't a grudge, this is self-preservation. That was years ago, Jessica said. People change. They deserve a second chance. They had their second chance when the court gave me back to them at 13. They blew it. They don't get a third chance just because you think family reunions make good wedding photos. Jessica slammed a pot down on the counter. Fine. If you want to be bitter and unforgiving for the rest of your life, that's your choice. But I'm not canceling our wedding, and I'm not uninviting your parents. If you can't handle seeing them for one day to support our marriage, then maybe you're not ready to be a husband. I looked at this woman I had planned to spend my life with and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. The Jessica I fell in love with was kind and understanding. This person was manipulative and dismissive of my feelings. You're right, I said quietly. I'm not ready to be a husband. At least not to someone who would betray my trust and then blame me for being upset about it. I went upstairs and started packing my belongings. Jessica followed me, alternating between tears and anger, begging me not to leave and then accusing me of being immature and selfish. I spent that night at Tony's apartment, and the next morning I called Jessica to tell her that the wedding was off. Update 3. Michael, you can't be serious, Jessica said when I called her the next morning. The wedding is in 4 days. Everything is paid for. Our families are flying in. You can't just cancel everything because you're having a tantrum. This isn't a tantrum, Jessica. This is me protecting myself from people who have already proven they'll hurt me, including you. Including me? Michael, everything I've done has been because I love you and want what's best for you. You went behind my back and contacted people who abused me as a child. You invited them to our wedding without my consent. And when I told you how much that hurt me, you dismissed my feelings and told me to get over it. That's not love, Jessica. That's control. Jessica was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe she was finally going to understand. Then she said, your parents told me that you were always a difficult child. They said you were prone to exaggerating and holding grudges. Maybe they were right. I felt like she had punched me in the stomach. Wow. You really just said that to me. I'm trying to make you see reason, Michael. You're throwing away our entire relationship over one disagreement. This isn't a disagreement about what color napkins to use at the reception, Jessica. This is about fundamental respect and trust. You've shown me that you don't respect my boundaries and you don't trust my judgment about my own life and trauma. So that's it? You're just going to walk away from everything we've built together? You walked away from it when you decided to go behind my back and make decisions for me without my consent. Jessica started crying. Michael, please. I love you. I was just trying to help you heal. I thought if you could see that your parents had changed, you could finally move on from your past. Jessica, my past made me who I am. The trauma I experienced taught me to recognize unhealthy behaviors and protect myself from people who would hurt me. I've moved on by building a life free from abuse and manipulation. What you did wasn't healing, it was re-traumatizing. So you're really going to humiliate me by canceling our wedding 4 days beforehand? I'm going to protect myself by not marrying someone who has proven they'll betray my trust and then blame me for being upset about it. The conversation ended with Jessica screaming at me and then hanging up. Over the next few hours, I received dozens of calls and texts from her family members, all telling me I was making a huge mistake and that I was being selfish and immature. I called a wedding venue and our vendors to cancel everything. Most of them were understanding, though we lost significant deposits. I called my small circle of friends who were planning to attend and explained the situation. All of them supported my decision. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I heard a man's voice that I hadn't heard in over 10 years. Michael? This is your father. My hand started shaking. How did you get this number? Jessica gave it to us. Son, we heard about the wedding being called off. We're so sorry this happened. We were really looking forward to seeing you again. Robert, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I did not invite you to my wedding. Jessica went behind my back and contacted you without my knowledge or consent. I do not want a relationship with you or Linda. I need you to respect that and not contact me again. Michael, we've changed. We're not the same people we were when you were growing up. We've been sober for years, and we've done a lot of work on ourselves. We want to make amends for the mistakes we made. The mistakes you made? I repeated. Robert, you beat me. You told me I was worthless. You chose alcohol over my safety for my entire childhood. Those weren't mistakes, those were choices. And the consequences of those choices include not having a relationship with me. Son, we love you. We've always loved you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have hurt me. And if you love me now, you'll respect my boundaries and leave me alone. I hung up and immediately blocked the number. Then I called Jessica. Did you give my parents my phone number? I asked as soon as she answered. Yes, I thought maybe if they could talk to you directly. Jessica, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to hear me. If you ever give my personal information to Robert and Linda again, I will file a restraining order against all three of you. Do you understand me? Michael, you're being ridiculous. They just want to talk to their son. I am not their son. I'm a man who happened to share DNA with two people who abused him as a child. That's where the relationship ends. You're going to regret this, Jessica said. You're going to spend the rest of your life alone because you're too stubborn to forgive people who made mistakes when they were younger. Maybe I will be alone, I said. But I'd rather be alone than be with people who don't respect my boundaries or my right to make decisions about my own life. Fine, Jessica said, and her voice turned cold and cruel. You know what? Maybe your parents were right about you. Maybe you were too damaged to maintain relationships. Maybe that's why you were in foster care for so long, because even strangers could see that you were broken and unlovable. The line went quiet as her words sank in. This woman who had claimed to love me was now using my deepest traumas as weapons against me. Thank you, I said finally. Thank you for what? For showing me exactly who you were before I made the mistake of marrying you. You just proved that you're no different from Robert and Linda. When you don't get your way, you attack people at their most vulnerable points. I dodged a bullet by not marrying you. I hung up and blocked her number 2. Update 4. It's been 2 weeks since I called off the wedding, and I'm doing surprisingly well. The first few days were rough. I felt guilty about the deposits we lost and the inconvenience to our guests. But as time has passed, I've felt increasingly relieved that I discovered Jessica's true character before we got married. Tony has been an incredible friend throughout this whole ordeal. He helped me move my remaining belongings out of Jessica's house while she was at work, and he's been letting me stay in his guest room while I look for my own place. You did the right thing, he told me on my first night at his apartment. Anyone who would ambush you with your abusive parents at your own wedding doesn't deserve to be in your life. I've been going to therapy twice a week to process everything that happened. My therapist has helped me understand that Jessica's behavior was a form of emotional abuse. She deliberately violated my boundaries, dismissed my trauma, and then blamed me for being upset about it. Healthy partners respect each other's boundaries, especially around trauma, my therapist explained. They don't override their partner's decisions about their own mental health and safety. I've also realized that Jessica's obsession with reuniting me with Robert and Linda wasn't really about my healing or well-being. It was about her discomfort with my trauma and her need to create a neat, tidy narrative where everyone forgives and forgets. But trauma doesn't work that way. Healing doesn't mean pretending bad things didn't happen or that people who hurt you deserve access to your life. I signed a lease on a small but beautiful apartment downtown, close to my office. It has huge windows and exposed brick walls, and for the first time in months, I feel excited about the future. I haven't heard from Jessica since our last phone call, though I know through mutual friends that she's been telling people I had a mental breakdown and that she tried everything to help me. I don't care what story she tells about our relationship. The people who matter know the truth. I also haven't heard from Robert and Linda, which suggests they got the message that I'm serious about maintaining no contact. Dating feels like it's far in the future, but I'm okay with that. I've learned that I'd rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't respect my boundaries or my right to make decisions about my own life and healing. The most important thing I've learned from this experience is that I can trust my instincts. When Jessica first started pushing for reconciliation with my parents, something in my gut told me it wasn't safe. I should have listened to that instinct instead of trying to make her understand. I'm proud of myself for walking away from a situation that would have caused me more trauma. It took courage to cancel the wedding and end the relationship, but it was the right decision for my mental health and my future. Sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing other people. Sometimes it means being called selfish or difficult or unforgiving. But your safety and well-being are worth more than other people's comfort or expectations. I'm building a life surrounded by people who respect my boundaries and support my healing. And that feels like the greatest victory of all.